Hello and welcome to Michael's Minty Music for today. Today we review Blondie's debut 1976 album, Blondie. It's pretty good, really interesting, and definitely great for a debut album. This is kind of the debut you want. This is the track listing, and these are the tracks I added to my playlist. 10 out of 11, all of them but one. This album is really good, and basically every song here has something interesting going on. The style somehow is both a late 50s or sort of a late 50s, early 60s throwback, and also early 80s new wave sort of innovation sound. It's like they're using the sort of late 70s synth technology to recreate the early 60s pop sound, and it works surprisingly well. In general, I mean, the individual songs aren't particularly outstanding, but they're all good, and they all sound a bit different from each other. Nothing in here sounds the same. Each song is pretty distinct, which is really great. The album flows fine. The songs are almost all too different to flow really well together or to create a sort of larger sound. I mean, I guess as a whole, it sounds like a retro album. It's got late 70s innovations, though, so there was a couple of songs here that sounded a lot like the Velvet Underground, which is kind of a pleasant surprise. Definitely a lot of different influences in this one, and this is definitely sort of a throwback album and but with some amount of small innovations of the time. For a debut, though, this is pretty outstanding. All the songs here are good, and there isn't any sticking to one sound, which is like pretty much exactly what you want for a first album. There were two singles released before the album, Ex-Offender and In the Flesh, neither of which were on the radio. This album as a whole wasn't very popular at the time, which is kind of disappointing, but I guess it's a little bit ahead and behind of its time, I guess. My favorite song here is probably Rip Her to Shreds. It's got a great groove and interesting lyrics. There was some competition, though, from A Shark in Jet's Clothing, which sounds weirdly like a song from the Croc soundtrack, and the final track, Attack of the Giant Ants, which is really funny and also sounds pretty good, too, in my opinion. So both of those were also good songs, but I think I like Rip Her to Shreds the best. As the only Blondie album I've heard so far, it takes the only spot in the rankings, so not really much to say there. But I have decided that this album doesn't take my top spot from 1976. I'm keeping it with Billy Joel's Turnstiles. Although it was a bit of a tough decision, I feel like Turnstiles has the same amount of musical diversity, and it flows a lot better than Blondie, and it has a slightly higher quality. It's really close, but I mean, this is one of Billy Joel's best albums, and Blondie is great, but it's just not there in terms of overall quality. At this point, Billy Joel is sort of at the almost height of his career, so I think he manages to do it better here. But the fact that it's pretty close is pretty impressive. Blondie, that's really impressive for a debut. It's difficult to get a debut as the favorite, but this one, Blondie is not quite as good as Turnstiles, but it is pretty close. Next up is Billy Joel's 1977 album, The Stranger. It's a great album, and I think it's one of his better ones, so stay tuned for that. And as always, stay minty.